Okay. So the question is that since Angular is a front-end framework and Express is a back-end framework, and Express has nothing in common with Angular, so how can we start an Express application with this command like ng serve API, where ng is the Angular CLI? So this is just because that we are using NX as a workspace, and NX has good integration with the Angular CLI. Basically क्या है कि I could have used the NX CLI. असल में जब मैं ये ng serve API लिख रहा हूँ ना, behind the scenes Angular का CLI fire नहीं हो रहा. If you see the next statement, it is running this command behind the scenes, which is nx run API serve. तो अगर मैं डायरेक्टली कंसोल पे ये चीज़ लिखता हूँ ना, तो भी मेरा एपीआई ही सर्व होने वाली है. एंड इफ़ आई गो टू द लॉग फॉर यूआई ऑल्सो, लेट्स सी व्हाट इज दैट डूइंग. तो ये भी एनएक्स के सीएलआई के ऊपर ही एप्लीकेशन चला रहा है. सो एनएक्स ने क्या किया हुआ है, एक लेयर बना रखी है एंगुलर के सीएलआई के ऊपर. जब मैं एंगुलर के सीएलआई से कमांड लॉन्च करता हूँ ना, इट इंटरसेप्ट्स दैट एंड बिहाइंड द सीन लॉन्चेस दैट रिक्वेस्ट फ्रॉम इट्स ओन सीएलआई. तो ये कमांड चल रही है असल में nx run app serve.
Okay.
ठीक है. So this command is not actually being run by Angular. This is being run by nx. It is just an abstraction layer given to the developers that उनको नहीं समझना है कि nx की commands क्या हैं. जो commands हम ऑलरेडी यूज़ कर रहे हैं एंगुलर के लिए, वी हैव टू जस्ट कीप यूजिंग दैम एंड इट विल वर्क. अभी बिल्ड करने के लिए भी आई डोंट हैव टू रिमेंबर एनएक्स की कमांड मुझे याद करने की जरूरत नहीं है. आई कैन सिंपली से ng build API, and behind the scenes it will run some build script and build the API code for me.
Okay.
So just a second. Okay, another thing, yesterday we were trying to use the libraries of NX. We created this one called domain, and इसके अंदर हमने ना कुछ classes बनाई थी, interfaces and classes. So we were trying to use it, but the syntax we were using was incorrect. There were two problems in that. Let me show. Okay. So the first thing is we were writing it as at domain. Instead of that, it had to be the application name slash domain. And what the application name is, if I go to any of Angular JSON or that NX JSON, let's try Angular JSON. So let me see, where is that? Oh no, this is not the correct one. Go to this guy. Okay, so this is the name of the application. It is called Stream, right? So I have to prefix all the libraries with at stream and then the name of the library. Okay, so I had to import it like this, at stream slash then the library name, and whatever I have exported from this library's index file, I can import it here. Okay, so and the other problem was this VS Code has some inbuilt cache, and even if I write this for a new library, it will start to complain. Let's try it once. Means sometimes it complains, sometimes it not. So let me create one ng generate library, and let's call it delete me. Okay. I hope this command works because I don't know the nx command for this, but I'm hoping that it's going to work. No, I don't want this. Okay, so I can go to this nx CLI and then click generate. Okay, I want to create this workspace library, and the name I want to give is, suppose, utils. Okay, so I'm assuming that this library might be used for certain code which can be shared across projects. Okay. Okay, so this has created that library for me now. So here we have this utils, and inside this we already have one file exported, and let's see what is the content of that. So it is just a function called utils. Okay, I can export anything from here, but let's now try to use this in this controller. I'll, instead of domain, I'll say utils. Okay, but you see it is complaining here. It says it cannot find this module. But if I close this editor and start it again, it will find that. And I also have to build it once. Means this is an issue with VS Code. This is not the issue with the NX. Let me try this. Close editor. Close folder. Okay, and now if I open that one again, documents, work, personal trainings, sessions, Angular, stream. Okay, so now when I run this application, I should be able to see that. It is still loading though. Okay, so now it is recognizing this, and if I see what this utils is, it is saying it is a function which returns a string. But previously it was complaining that it is not able to find that. I didn't do anything. I just restarted it, and it is now working. Okay, so this is just an heads up that sometimes when you create a new library, it is this VS Code caches some of the stuff, so you might get some errors. It is not that your code is incorrect, it is just that this guy has cached something and it is not reflecting your changes. Okay. Okay, so let me start both of the applications again. gserve API. Okay, so now it should be working. All right. So today what we are going to do is अभी हमने इसको mock किया था जो user login है ना. So I want to now start working on a database and bring these users from a database. And once we are done with that, then we'll try to use JWT as a library for authentication and authorization. So let's first of all talk about MongoDB. Anyone has experience with some databases?
Yes, basically mostly the RDMS databases.
Okay. Uh, yeah. We are not going to use an RDBMS database here. We are going to use this NoSQL MongoDB, and this Mongoose is a very neat library upon that. So there is a term called ORM, that stands for Object Relational Mapping, and I would like to elaborate on this term first of all. So the term is called Object Relation Mapper, which is full form of ORM. Now, what this means is in a relational database, a table is called a relation. Okay, and object is an entity inside our code. So a tool which maps an object into a relation, that is called ORM. Okay, And if you have some experience with, let's say, entity framework, or there are and I don't remember most of them, like on SQL side, but entity framework is one of the ORMs for SQL Server or .NET framework. Similarly, if I talk about NoSQL databases, we don't call them relations here. We have the term of documents. So if I'm talking about a MongoDB or Cosmos DB kind of database, then the mapper for that is called ODM, Object Document Mapper. Okay, and Mongoose is one of the ODMs for MongoDB. Okay, so this is a database which is quite similar to a relational database, but has certain different terminologies. Instead of tables, in MongoDB we have collections, and instead of records we have documents. Okay, so there is one-to-one mapping between table and collection, and record maps to a document. Okay, so the left one is for a relational database, and the right one is for a NoSQL database or a non-relational database. Okay, so let's start with adding MongoDB. I have installed MongoDB on my machine. So first of all, I'll give some instructions how to install that. Okay, so we have to go to this mongodb.com. Let me find install MongoDB. And I'm using the community edition, which is free and we can use it in production. Currently, I have this Mac OS. People who are using Windows or Linux, they can follow the relevant documentation. But let me open this one for now. Uh, on Mac, I have to first of all install this Xcode, which is already installed on my machine. Then the only command I need to run is like first add this MongoDB into the installation scripts inside my machine, and then install it with this command: brew install MongoDB community. So once I run this, I'll get MongoDB installed on my machine, and it is going to be installed as a service. So it should automatically start whenever my computer starts. Okay. So you can follow this documentation. I'll link this one in the documentation. Another tool which I have installed on my machine is MongoDB Compass. I'll link this one also. So how this MongoDB Compass looks like is, for this one also I have installed the community edition. So this is the GUI for the database. If I want to see what records are there and I want to tweak something or see something, basically write some queries in the GUI, I can use this editor. Okay. So the connection string for MongoDB is something like this. The protocol is MongoDB. As we know, like there are protocols like HTTP, HTTPS, SSH, FTP. The protocol here is MongoDB. And then we have the host name and optionally the port where this MongoDB service is running. The default port should be 27017. Then we can have different options. I'm not going to discuss them right now, but even if I don't specify these options, it will work. After the domain, I can specify the name of the database I want to connect to. So let me edit this one. Suppose I want to connect to a collection called CMS, which should exist on my machine. Okay, so this is the database I have connected to, and it has some data. This one. So it has some collections which have some records. I'm not going to go inside that, what it has currently. But the connection string is pretty straightforward. It just have to have a domain name, port, then the name of the collection. By default, I think it is admin if you do not specify anything. It is for validations. Like all the users for this database exist in the admin collection. Okay. So now in MongoDB, if I'm using Mongoose and I want to connect to my local installation, I first of all need these Mongoose as an npm package in the application. So I'll first of all install it. Npm install mongoose dash dash save. So what this script is going to do is it's going to install inside the node modules this mongoose library and then add it to the packages and also. And since this is going to be a runtime dependency, I'm not putting it in the dev dependencies. It has to be inside these dependencies. The difference between these two is these dependencies are even required once the code is built and running on a server, but the dev dependencies do not have to be there once the code is built and running. Okay. So since Mongoose is required when the application is running or deployed on the server, so I have used this dash dash save. Otherwise, I would have used dash dash save dash dev. Okay. So it has added Mongoose here. All right. So since I am using TypeScript, the documentation for Mongoose is basically written in JavaScript. So there are slight differences, but once you understand what is going on behind the scenes, it's pretty easy. So here in the users controller, what I am going to do is I already have a collection, a class called user. Okay, and I am going to base the schema for this user collection in my database on this interface. Okay, so let's first of all see how a user looks like. Okay, lib domain source user. Okay, so this user interface, it has an ID property. Okay, I want to call this. I want to basically remove this ID property because it is not going to be given to me by MongoDB. MongoDB has a different kind of ID that is underscore ID, which is on the UI side it is a string. On the server side it is a different type. Okay, I'll remove this one for now. List. Okay, I want to have password here, which is going to be optional. Okay. And why this password is optional is because I'm going to use this interface both on the UI and the API also. On the UI, password is not a required field because I'm not never going to return the password to the UI. But on the API side, it will be required. I will add validations for this in the schema. Okay. So we are first of all going to create a schema how the data is going to look like in the database. So let's start with that. So inside domain, so uh, I can do one out of two things. Either I can use this library domain or I can create another one. So I would prefer to create another one at this point. So let's suppose I'm going to generate another library and I'll call it something models or something like that. Let's call it DB schema. It says this already exists. Why is that? Let's see what happened. I think I ran this command 2 times. What? DB schema already exists. Okay, that's fine. No issues. Right. So here I am going to delete both of these. I don't want them. And here inside the lib folder, I'll create the first schema. I'll call it user schema. And this is going to be an interface, first of all. Document. And the other one is, okay, I want to use a convention for interfaces. For the interfaces, I want to use I as a prefix for all of them. Const schema equals new schema, and the schema is also going to come from Mongoose. And all the properties which are there in this interface, I have to define them inside the schema. So actually what I have done here is I am just providing some type information for my schema so that when I use it in the API, I should get some IntelliSense support. So till this point, all I have done is just an interface. It does not exist in the compiled code. Okay, this is just for me when I am writing code. So username, it is going to have type of string, and notice I have used the capital S instead of small. Okay. Type is string and it is a required property. Let's say true. And this is also going to be unique. Then I have password property, and in the schema I'll say the same things for this one also. So it is also of type string. It is a required property, and it has it does not have to be unique. Passwords can be different. Then what's next? Username, password, and then we have this role and the name property. So name is going to be of type string again. It is not required and not unique, so I'll not write any other things here. Role. So this role is of type enum. Okay, so I'll say type. First of all, it is number, and the enum which is going to support is user role dot admin user role dot client user role dot organization. Okay, so these are all the possible values for this property, and since these are going to be numbers, I have said the type is going to be number, and then I can say it is a required property. Okay, So this is the schema how the data is going to look inside the database. So it is going to have all these properties. ID is an auto-generated field which MongoDB itself is going to generate. So I don't have to write ID here. So these are the other properties which I am specifying as the part of the schema. And now I have to create a model which I'll call user equals new model. Model is again a function which I'll import from Mongoose. And here I'll use this interface, iUser schema. And I have to pass certain properties here. The first one is the name of the collection, and the second one is the schema object. So I'll export this. Only void functions can be called. Okay, so it was not expecting a new keyword there. All right, so this is the schema file for the user database. We might have questions here. Let's discuss those. Any questions? Yes or no?
So, Rohit, so here we are saying that the schema has to be like this for a. So, what if the schema changes in future? I mean, we add certain new fields to this user schema. I mean, can we? Are we supposed to be doing it in Mongo directly, or has it to happen here first?
Okay, so this is again a good question. Basically, MongoDB does not know anything about a schema. It is a schema-less database. Okay, but even though I am using MongoDB behind the scenes, I am writing the schema, which seems to be a mistake because by definition, MongoDB does not have any schemas. So why at all I am doing all of this? This is just because to satisfy Mongoose, because Mongoose does a lot of things on this schema. So suppose in your collection you have 10 more fields. Okay, suppose you have parent name, spouse name, and all means bunch of fields in the database. But what Mongoose is going to give you is only these properties. Okay.
Okay.
So it has happened that I worked on certain databases where some other process was creating data in the database, but my process had to read that or modify it in some way. So I generally create only those fields in the schema which I am concerned of. Okay. It is possible that on the database level there are different fields. Okay. So
Okay.
this schema is not the entire truth. It is just what will be accessible to your application.
Mm-hmm.
So it is possible that when you save data in the database, say from another process, you can put a different kind of object into that. It does not have to follow the schema at all. It is just that when Mongoose queries the data, when it returns back to you in the process, it will match all these fields and give only these ones to you.
Okay.
Behind the scenes, these are just setters and getters. So it is a complex process which it is doing for us. And this kind of relates to a SQL based database where we have defined schemas. Uh, but this makes a lot of sense when you are working on a complex application. Schema-less databases, I don't feel they are so good on a structured application because generally you will have some joins going on in the application because you might normalize the data based on the requirement. Though the concepts on MongoDB do not require you to do that, but if you don't do normalization on a database, it tends to be very complex and very expensive queries in that case. because you might want only a limited set of data, but you will be getting a very big giant object, which is not useful at some times.
Okay. So ideally, if suppose we are, writing a web app, and the schema should be decided right from this interface, right? The Express and the Express interface, I suppose. I mean, we shouldn't be doing the schema there directly in the database like we typically do for our DBMSs.
Yeah, so since the work culture in this kind of application is different, we do not create those tables in the SQL statements. Like there is nothing similar to that in this world. We generally write the schema, and you know what? Even if I don't write this interface at all, suppose I don't have this one, and I remove this guy from here, it is not going to make any difference for me. So it is still going to work the same way. The only difference with these interfaces is that when I start to write some code, I'll get IntelliSense if I use this interface. Otherwise, I won't get that. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. And talking about the schema, so for using Mongoose, the schema is required. But if you are using the native MongoDB driver, the schema is not at all required. You don't need that. You
Okay.
can take any JSON object, put it to the database, and then use MongoDB queries to query that. It is going to work just fine. There's no requirement of this thing. But if you see, I have used this unique property, a required property. All these validations are handled by Mongoose. I don't have to go inside code and do these validations. Mongoose is already going to do these for me before it creates the data object into the database. So
Okay, and this will generally make this whole application more maintainable over the lifetime of the project, probably, right? Because
exactly.
if
So
suppose people are joining in and they're not aware what old guys had written, I mean, it will create a lot of complexities if this is not done properly.
yes. Because if the schema is not defined, anyone would try to write anything into the database, and if there is no validations in place, so it can ideally corrupt the database or means have some consequences. But if we have these kind of structures already in place, it will be helpful and maintainable.
Okay.
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 I need to create users in the database. Okay. So what I'll do is I'll comment out this one for now. Okay. And let's see if the app is working or not. Okay, this is running. And now what I want here is I want to comment this for now. Okay, I'll create another method for creation of users. Router.post, where I'll say the post is going to be on the root of this endpoint. And I'll specify why I'm doing that. So what I have to do here is I want to import that user model which I had created. So let me first of all import that. So you can see it is not giving me IntelliSense at this point. I need to restart the editor for that. But I won't do it because I'll have to restart the applications again. Let me just clarify. Okay, so this is user. And this should be available now. Okay, so I'll say user dot, or I can say new user, which is going to be from request.body. So in the body, this is kind of a sign up endpoint, and I'm going to create an object of type user with the payload of the request. and then I'll say await user.save, and in order to use await here I have to use this async keyword, and then I'll say response JSON user. DB schema, what it is saying, can't resolve this. I have to restart this. It can be problematic initially, like when you are creating something. But once you have all those libraries in place and this guy has cached them, then it should be just fine. And this time I'll start the service from another terminal, so even if I restart it, it shouldn't be closed. Okay. So till now, I do not have the connection with the database, right? I have just written some code, but at this point, I do not have a connection to the database. So I'll first of all create that connection. I need to import Mongoose here. Connect. So this is the function we are going to use, and what I'll do here is before starting the application, I want to create a connection. So I'll say connect. So this is going to take the connection string Mongo DB localhost 27017 slash suppose training 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 dot then if this guy is successful, the connection was established, then I want to start the server, and otherwise if there was an error I want to log that error. Okay, so it should work. Oh, okay. So the problem with that this thing is that in the index file, I have not exported that file. I have exported the wrong file. Okay. All right. So now I think this should work. Schema. Okay. So it is complaining for that. I need to get rid of that ID property. Okay. So let's try to create a document. So if you notice here, right now I do not have a trainings collection here. Even if I refresh, I won't get that. But once I have created one document, oh, here I have. When was this created? Okay. So seems like when I started the application, it created one for me. Let me drop this. So now I don't have that collection, but I'm expecting if I restart or I create a document, I should get that back again. Okay. So by now it's not there. Let me go to the postman and I'm going to make a post request on API v1 users, and in the body I'll put some data here. Name is going to be Rohit, password is there. What else is required? Name, username, password, and role. For role, I can say 0. Okay, so I have got back one object, which is, I suppose, has been created in the database. So let me refresh here again. So I have this collection trainings and it's, sorry, database training. And inside that I have this collection users, which now has one record. Okay. So let me try to again make this same user. It should throw an error because username is a unique field. It cannot have the same value multiple times. And why this didn't return is क्योंकि हमने error को handle नहीं करा हुआ उसके अंदर. So all we have done here is we are looking for a success response and then returning some data. But if there was an error, we didn't handle that. Okay, so it is stuck inside the API process only. So one way to do that is try and then puts this guy inside this one also. Otherwise, catch, and here I'll say response dot status. Let's say 400 dot JSON. Okay, let me try this one again. The server is not yet started. Seems like, yeah, it is up now. Okay, so now I am getting back this error which says Mongo error. The username is a required property, which means a unique property which I have repeated here. So it is complaining for that. And now if I write something else here, like admin1, and I want to change the password also for this one. So it has created that object again. So now I should have two objects here. Okay, so admin and admin1. And if I again try the same object, it is going to throw an error for that one also. Okay. So this is Mongoose doing all this stuff behind the scenes. I don't have to write anything for that validation by my own. So any questions till this point?
Rohit, when we created these checks on the schema through Mongo, I mean when the collection is created, at that time, I mean, does Mongo DB have that view that okay, this is a unique field, this is blah blah blah, or how is it happening?
What I think means I have never seen such kind of constraints on a MongoDB level, because this UI does not show what all constraints are applied on that. Means I have never seen them, and I don't feel that they exist there. I'm not sure. They might exist, but I'm not sure about that. What I have read about Mongoose is it is doing these things for us.
Okay.
But for that unique index, I know that it is created inside here. So if I see here, this index is created.
So probably Mongoose is while it is creating this on the database, probably it's telling it that okay, this is supposed to be a unique field, right?
Yeah. So I see it here. So it is having this property unique. So there are
Okay,
other
and
kind of,
ID is there by default unique. The running number which Mongo generates by
yes,
its own.
yes. So we have added another validation for the role property. We have defined that enumeration. So if I change this to an invalid number, say 6, I should again get an error, and this one is going to be returned from Mongoose. So the previous one was from Mongo, this one is from Mongoose. So it is saying 6 is not a valid enum value for path role. Okay, and it tells me that these are the
सर जो
possible values.
एरर आ रहे हैं वो
What's that? I couldn't hear that.
सर जो एरर्स आ रहे हैं वो इतने मतलब यूजर फ्रेंडली और मतलब नहीं है, मतलब इसको हम थोड़ा और कैसे ठीक कर सकते हैं, जैसे जो पिछला मैसेज भी आया यूनिकनेस वाला।
सो उसके लिए क्या करते हैं हम जनरली, हम एक लेयर लिखते हैं दैट इज गोइंग टू फॉर्मेट ऑल द रिस्पॉन्सेज फ्रॉम योर एप्लीकेशन, and you have a consistent payload throughout all the endpoints. So there is generally something like this. I can write down. So there is a custom status, which is the status codes which you define for the application. Let's say for success, you might use the HTTP status codes, but generally we do not use them. We create our on list of status codes which we use. Suppose IP 200 is the success code for your application, and then data will have whatever data you want to return from here. If there is an error, data is going to be null in that case, and you can have any error. Inside error, you will define the message, whatever message you want, and means you can define this payload, and then this payload is going to be returned all the time whenever there is a success or an error. So this status code is going to represent what is the kind of response you have got, either it is success or an error. And if it is a success, you will read data property, and if it is an error code, you will read this error object. Okay, and then this error can have different properties which you want the application to expose. In order to achieve this, we'll write a wrapper for all of our endpoints or these middlewares, which will transparently take all the responses from this object. Means whatever you pass into this response.json, it will transparently take that, format into that defined format, and then send it back.